Afternoon, Savannah, and welcome to a special presentation of the Better Savannah Facebook page. Better Savannah is the area's leading independent expenditure committee. We are committed to better public policy. I'm John McMasters, former county commissioner and the founder of Better Savannah. I've been involved in local public policy now for 25 years, from property tax reform to curbside recycling to term limits to holding local officials accountable. There's a lot of work to do, and we need you. We believe the best way to crafting a better community for everyone is through better political outcomes. There's plenty of personality in every election, yet at the end of the day, it's public policy that matters most. It is my hope that you, as a voter, will lean in, learn, and cast an informed ballot. I want to thank everyone who helped make today's event possible, but most of all, I want to say a special thank you to you, the viewers, and you, the voters. Enjoy the event. Now, I'll ask Chuck Fagan to introduce our moderators and our candidates. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you to our candidates for joining us and to our two moderators. I want to thank all of you viewers for joining us this afternoon. Just want to quickly go over the ground rules real quick. Our candidates will have 2 minutes to introduce themselves, and then we will allow them to go into the questioning. The early rounds of questions will consist of 3-minute responses with 90-second rebuttals. If a candidate invokes their opponent, the moderator has a right to give up to a 30-second follow-up. In subsequent rounds, we will finish with 2-minute answers, 60-second rebuttals, and the same rules applying for follow-ups. I want to introduce our moderators today. First, Dr. Maxine Bryant holds a Bachelor's of Science degree from Ball State University, a Master of Arts degree from Saginaw Valley State Universities, and a Doctor of Philosophy in Human Services from Walden Universities. All of her degrees have a concentration in criminal justice and corrections. In December 2011, Dr. Bryant relocated to Savannah, Georgia to take a job here as a lecturer at the old Armstrong University, now Georgia Southern. She's a published author of 2 books and has been recognized and honored in many ways over the years. In 1994, she was recognized as one of America's 2,000 notable women. Additionally, Dr. Bryant is listed in the 1998 editions of the Marquis Who's Who in the Midwest and the International Who's Who of Professionals. Dr. Bryant's research interests specifically focus on factors contributing to the successful community reintegration of released prisoners. Specifically, she's written and or presented on transitional jobs for newly released prisoners, the role of the Black church in successful offender reintegration, the impact of unaddressed childhood trauma and barriers to successful offender reintegration. We want to thank Dr. Bryant for joining us this afternoon. Our co-moderator is Constance Cooper. After spending 8 years as an investigative journalist for newspapers and on WTOC TV, Constance attended law school in her adopted home here in Savannah, Georgia at the old Savannah Law School. Constance earned her undergraduate degree in communications from DePaul University in Chicago, where she graduated magna cum laude and was an Arthur J. Schmidt Scholarship recipient. During her time as a journalist, Constance earned multiple awards, including 2 Georgia Associated Press Managing Editors Awards and 4 Georgia Press Association Awards. Constance finds the networks of contacts in the coastal empire and low country she cultivated as a journalist to be invaluable in her work as an attorney. She utilizes the skills she mastered as a reporter, investigating, interviewing, network, and negotiating to zealously advocate for her clients, as I'm sure you've recently seen. Constance is a member of the Georgia and South Carolina bars and is admitted to practice in the Georgia Court of Appeals, the Georgia Supreme Court, the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Georgia, and the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of South Carolina. She's active in the Savannah Trial Lawyers Association, the Georgia Trial Lawyers Association, the Savannah Bar Association, the Association of Women Lawyers, and the South Carolina Association of Women Lawyers. Constance is originally from Alba, Alabama, where her little sister is currently running to be the first female and second Cooper mayor. Her hobbies include running, yoga, dancing, and performing stand-up comedy, which is very funny. So I want to thank both of you for joining us here this afternoon to moderate this event. Dr. Bryant, if you will, take it from here and introduce our two candidates running for district attorney.
Thank you, Chuck. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you all this afternoon. This is a critical election coming up in the fall. The current DA, district attorney for Chatham County, is Meg Keep. And Meg Keep has been our district attorney since 2013. Many in the community feel that it's time for that power to shift. And so this afternoon, we have the opportunity to hear from two candidates who wish to have the opportunity to run against Meg coming up this fall. As Chuck said, each of you will have the opportunity to introduce yourselves for 2 minutes, and we're going to go in alphabetical order. I also want to remind you that at the close of the debate, you have an opportunity to give closing remarks also. So Ms. Shalena Cook-Jones, you will go first for 2 minutes, and then followed by Ms. Zena McClain. So Ms. Cook-Jones, would you please provide us with a 2-minute introduction?
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Moderator. I want to start my introduction by first saying, giving a heartfelt thanks to the good folks of Better Savannah. Thank you specifically to Chuck Fagan and John McMasters for setting up this opportunity. Dr. Bryant and Attorney Cooper, thank you also for your time today. And I really want to go ahead and thank the Chatham County voters who will be the ultimate decision makers and are really the reason that we're gathered here today. My name is Shalena Cook-Jones, and as has been said, I am running to become the next DA of Chatham County. I live in Savannah. I'm a mother of 2 school-age children, and I'm married to Lieutenant Colonel Javon Jones, who works here and is employed by the school board. Javon, my husband, is a native Savannian, and so I'm married to Savannah, and I moved here back to his hometown with him about 10 years ago. I'm here and I'm running for this office because, having been in the office, I just believe that there are better ways to improve our criminal justice system and make prosecution in Chatham County equitable and fair for all of our citizens. So I hope I have a chance to tell you more about how I'd like to see that accomplished. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Ms. Zena McClain.
Yes, to moderators, the host, Better Savannah, to Ms. Cook-Jones, and to Better Savannah's followers. Good afternoon. My name is Zena McClain. I was born and raised in Washington, D.C. However, I've lived the majority of my life in Savannah, Chatham County, so I consider Savannah, Chatham County my home. I am married to the man I first met in high school, my high school sweetheart. We've been together, married for a very, very long time, and together we share 2 children. Both of our children attended school, were born and raised in Savannah, Georgia, and are graduates of Windsor Forest Senior High School. We are members of Bethel AME Church under the leadership of Reverend Gregory Lorton. I am a graduate of Howard University in Washington, D.C., and St. Louis University School of Law in St. Louis, Missouri. I am the owner of the McClain Law Firm, where I have continuously maintained my office for over 23 years in the county. I've taught courses in business law, immigration law, administrative law, and employment law at South College and Armstrong Atlantic State University, when both universities had paralegal study programs. And so that's a little bit of information about me. If you want to learn more about my personal background and professional experiences, please feel free to visit my website at www.zenamcclain.com. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies. We appreciate the opportunity. And again, I do want to thank Better Savannah for putting on and hosting this particular debate. I've been telling people that it's going to be a critical debate and a lively debate. And so I know the viewers are excited to hear from both you, Shalena Cook-Jones, and you, Zena McClain. So let us begin. We will be asking questions, Constance and I, of you alternately. We're going to start with Shalena Cook-Jones. And Ms. Jones, you will have 3 minutes. to respond to the question. And then following that, Ms. McLean, you'll have 90 seconds for a rebuttal. So if we're ready, we will begin. Ms. Cook-Jones, what can the average citizen do to support your work if you're elected? And what mechanisms will you incorporate to ensure involvement of your constituents?
The citizens of this great county are an integral part of our criminal justice system. And the first thing I want them to do is to become aware of that and become aware of the fact that without them, I can't do my job well. I would need and ask our citizens to show up for jury duty and civic service when called upon, because we need them to decide the most important cases in this county. But I also need them to join me in supporting the struggle of what I call community-oriented prosecution. That means being involved in neighborhood association meetings and helping with crime prevention initiatives, being willing to participate on maybe an advisory committee that would help us to hear our staff in our office to hear what the needs of the people are, sharing their wisdom and experiences with us. And overall, to demonstrate an interest in things like town hall meetings, which I would offer to them. I think these are integral ways that the DA can establish a relationship with the citizens and her constituency. And so what I would ask them to do when I take office would be to just get involved. I will be out there, I'll be visible and present, and I just ask them to participate in the process.
Thank you. Ms. McLean?
Yes, government works best when people know what's going on. I believe the best way for the average citizen to support the work that I intend to do when I'm elected is to become active in their community. One of my favorite quotes is from Mahatma Gandhi, who said, "The best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others." I want citizens to become involved in their neighborhood associations. To ensure consistent involvement of my constituents, I plan to make use of technology. I plan to make the website or my website more user-friendly and more informative. I plan to keep the citizens informed, whether it's via weekly press conferences or live social media press reports, or at monthly neighborhood association meetings. I plan to establish a Black Male Advisory Council who will work with me to reach at-risk male youth and empower them to make better choices and to help break down those silos of secrecy. And I also plan on publishing an annual report. So those are ways that I intend on keeping my constituents involved and informed about the work of the Office of
15 seconds.
Thank you, thank you. Before Constance asks her question, I want to follow up with Ms. Shalena Cook-Jones. You mentioned community-oriented prosecution. Explain what that is, please.
Community-oriented prosecution is a style of prosecution that's quite different from what we've seen traditionally. Traditionally, prosecutors have operated under the cloak of anonymity, which means that they've been put into office by the constituents, and then once they get there, no one knows what they're doing. As a result of that, they're not involved or interacting with the communities in a visible and significant, meaningful way. Community-based or oriented prosecution means that I would be not only prosecuting cases, but looking forward to hearing from the needs of the people. I would be looking to work with law enforcement for community-based policing initiatives. I would make sure that all of our efforts are data-driven and research-based. I'd be looking for
15 seconds.
Qualitative outcomes from the citizens also. So it's more community-centered than anything else.
Thank you, thank you. Ms. Constance?
This question is directed to Ms. McLean. What correlation, if any, do you believe there is between crime statistics and poverty levels? And what role do you think the DA has to play, and what ability does the DA have to address poverty issues?
The correlation between poverty and crime, Well, that's the subject for debate. If what you're asking whether or not poor people commit crime more than rich people, that's debatable. Whether or not poverty causes an increase in crime, that's also debatable. What I do know is that, or what I've read, is that if you're poor, if you're Black, and if you live in impoverished neighborhoods, you're more likely to be targeted by law enforcement. And as a Black male, you're more likely to be profiled. So where officers look for crime, you're going to have more people arrested. In dealing with or addressing the crime rate in our community, I believe you have to take a multifaceted approach in order to address those issues that affect the crime rate. One of those things that I've read that has the greatest impact on crime is the quality of education. Once you address the quality of education, then I believe you will begin to see a positive effect on reducing the reduced crime rate. Also, I've read studies that show that people that live in impoverished neighborhoods and also where there are a lack of social services, you tend to have a higher crime rate. So addressing the needs of the community, those who are most in need, health. You also have to address health disparities, the education, the quality of education, and the type of social services that you are offering. All of those things taken together can have a positive impact on crime, as well as dealing with systemic racism, because there is a lack of trust between those communities. So when you begin to address those issues, systemic racism, the effect that that has on the crime, levels of crime in your community, as well as those social issues, then that will begin to affect the statistics of crime in a city, in a relative city. So those are my thoughts on that.
I want to drill down on that. What power and ability do you think the district attorney has to affect those changes that you discussed?
Well, the district attorney can get involved in what's happening in the community. How you do that is you address the root causes of crime. You address those things, like if there's an issue with young people committing crime, then it would behoove the district attorney to get involved in
15 seconds.
Working with community stakeholders to address the problem, to create programs or offer those programs that's going to assist in crime reduction. Working with community stakeholders, being involved in the community. So that's one way the district attorney can get involved to help address those issues that are prevalent in a community.
Apologize to everyone. My cat seems to be wanting to guest star on this debate, so I apologize for that, Ms. McClain. Thank you for
and also
action so gracefully.
You're choppy as well. Also, the question is choppy, so I don't know. Somebody's internet connection is choppy, but
okay. Well, I apologize for that. Thank you for letting me
do
whatever I can to rectify that.
Okay.
So, Ms. Cook-Jones, want to go ahead and direct that question at you. Correlation between crime statistics and poverty, and also the ability and the role of the district attorney in addressing those issues.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Before I answer that question, can you refresh me again on how long my rebuttal time is? Is it 90 seconds?
90 seconds.
Okay, very well. I do agree that there is a relationship between crime statistics and poverty. I think there's a lot of social research that suggests that's true. I also think it is a multifaceted problem. It's not just poverty and economics, it's education, housing, health, and exposure to and access to different programs and opportunities. All of these things come together to make a crucible from which crime arises, and crime is just the symptom. instead of the root cause. I think in order to fix this, we are going to have it requires a collaborative effort between the DA's office and between community stakeholders. But I think that the thing the DA can do that has the most direct benefit is to make sure that they make it easier for those who have been punished to reintegrate back into society, specifically as it relates to employability and being able to get a job and affordable housing. Because once you have the stain of a criminal record or conviction, it becomes harder for you to do that. And then crime and recidivism goes up because you're out of options. So as a DA, that's what I would focus on.
Excellent. I'm turning it over
15
to you,
seconds,
Ms.
go ahead.
I was going to go ahead and turn it over to Ms. Bryant for the next question, please.
Thank you. Ms. Shalena Cook-Jones, you will be asked this question first. You will have 3 minutes to respond, followed by a 90-second rebuttal by Ms. Zena McClain. Based on your legal experience and training, what skill sets do you have that make you the best candidate to be our next Chatham County District Attorney?
Well, our citizens have to make that decision, that comparative decision between all of the candidates, but I would want them to consider this. I would want them to understand that I have been in not only in several prosecutors' offices before in different jurisdictions in DeKalb County, and I've also been a federal prosecutor out of state in Texas, but I've been in this particular DA's office, and I think that that gives me not only the experience, but the unique skill set that's required in order to do this job effectively and to supervise 40+ attorneys who are going to be doing the same thing. But in addition to professional experiences, I would like them to consider the fact I consider myself a leader. I consider myself someone who has demonstrated a commitment to serving the underserved and people who will find themselves in the margins and fringes of our society. And the reason that's important is because the DA has to demonstrate a sensitivity to all of their constituents rather than just some of them. As a prosecutor, I would want to approach my job with a very wide lens. And I think in order to do that, you have to be someone who has served the people. But I am someone who wants to create access and opportunity and equality for all citizens. And so I'd hope that they would consider me as their choice in November.
Ms. McClain?
Yes, I'm definitely the outlier, but no less qualified. I'm a veteran criminal defense attorney. For over 24 years, I've defended the innocent before judges and juries. I'm a veteran employment discrimination attorney. For over 24 years, I've successfully prosecuted corporations for workplace discrimination against my clients. I'm a successful business owner. I've owned and maintained a law firm for over 23 years in the county. I have served this community in over a dozen civic and community organization. And so I'm intimately familiar with the community. And I have worked with a cross section of individuals in this community, and am capable and competent to advocate on behalf of everyone. I have a heart for the people, a passion for service, and a record of service in this community. My professional and life experiences mirror my commitment to the ideals of justice, fairness, and transparency. Moreover, I am a mother. I'm a mother of a male and a female. I'm a sister of someone that has spent time behind bars. I'm the cousin of someone that was murdered by a stray bullet. So I have empathy. I understand the criminal justice system from both sides of the perspective. And when people look to elect leaders, they look for certain attributes. So not only do I have the attributes, I have the professional experiences, and I have the personal experiences to bring the much needed change in the office.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll turn it over to Ms. Constance.
Thank you very much. What internal and external structures do you believe Ms. Cook-Jones should be in place to hold the district attorney accountable?
First and foremost, the district attorney is accountable to the citizens and the voters of this great county. And the mechanism for holding the DA's power and authority in check is to assess whether or not that district attorney is doing a good job. The district attorney's seat is open, becomes open every 4 years. The district attorney serves for a term of 4 years. And so every 4 years, the voters have an opportunity to observe the work that the DA has done and to make a decision as to whether or not they want another 4 years of that. Beyond that, the DA's role typically goes on, as I have said before, under the cloak of anonymity, because they enjoy prosecutorial immunity. The only way to really bring a district attorney up on charges or hold them responsible is to institute an investigation with the GBI or with the Attorney General's office. But by and large, I perform to the voters and the citizens of this great county, and I expect that once they've given me a term, that I will be evaluated based on how they feel I'm performing and based on my performance. So the voting system, I think, is the best that we have in place, is the best way to be the checks and balance system on the DA.
A follow-up question with that. Why do you believe that there has been such a lack of willingness for people to come forward and run in the past? Ms. Heap running essentially unopposed.
Well, I think it's a multifold problem. The first issue is that I have found on the campaign trail so far, that many citizens don't really know what the DA does, or more importantly, why the DA's role is important to their daily life and their well-being. And so it's been my primary goal to educate people about that. But I also think that culturally speaking, we've come from
15 seconds.
An era where we've just done the same thing that we've been doing and expect different results. And that's why I'm suggesting that we change that.
Moving on to Ms. McClain, the same question. What internal and external structures do you believe should be in place to hold the district attorney accountable?
The district attorney should reflect the values of the constituents that they serve. The people elect the DA and should therefore hold the DA accountable. Internally, we do have checks and balances. For example, grand juries have the power to issue true bills of indictments or no bills. Criminal juries can also, criminal juries not only hold the guilty accountable, but they hold the DA accountable. If they acquit a person that's being charged with a criminal offense. Internally, you have your judges. They hold your district attorneys accountable for discovery abuses. Many cases are dismissed because of evidentiary issues, discovery abuses. You have the state bar. Lawyers have professional standards of conduct. So anyone can bring a complaint against a lawyer for ethical violations. And then you have the Department of Justice, a federal agency that's charged with investigating crimes of public integrity. So they have a specialized unit that investigates corruption of elected officials. So that is another way that you can check the power of an elected official, your district attorney.
15 seconds.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. McClain. Turning it over to Dr. Bryant.
And also, do I still have 15 minutes?
Oh, please go ahead.
I just wanted to bring one other.
Take your 15 seconds.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one other point, in addition to what Ms. Cook-Jones says, that you can, something about prosecution or bringing charges against the district attorney. Just want to mention that there's this thing called qualified immunity. And it's almost impossible to sue a district attorney for any work that they do in relation to their job. So just wanted to make that point.
Excellent. So moving on to Dr. Bryant now, would you please go ahead and present your next question?
Thank you. I'm going to go on and start with Ms. Shalena Cook-Jones. Currently, there is an outcry about the vigilante murder of Ahmaud Arbery in Brunswick. And I did notice that recently you had a Facebook Live conversation about him. I think that was last night or night before last, about that incident. While that is outside of Chatham County, what steps would you take for similar situations within your jurisdiction?
Yes, Madam Moderator, you're absolutely right to say that we did have a conversation, an in-depth conversation about that last night. It's a critical case and it's getting national attention. I've had a chance to consider what the role of the DA in that case should be. And the first thing it occurs to me that the first thing that I need to do as the DA is to not rush to judgment. Because of the advent of social media, we are quick to post things that, as you know, the recording leaked and information leaks out. And it's important to not rush to judgment, but preserve the criminal process and the evidence so that when the time does come for a jury trial, we can uphold the Constitution by picking a jury of fair and impartial members. But the other thing to do is to safeguard the investigative process to make sure that the investigations are carried out as they should be, and to do an internal conflict check, to check yourself and your staff, to make sure that there are no conflicts which may affect your impartiality or your office's impartiality in handling the case. And finally, I would secure community confidence, which means that when something like that happens, it damages the fabric and the integrity of our society as a whole. And I think it's incumbent upon the DA to step into that moment as a leader to assure the public that it will be properly handled and that so that we can secure the public trust. Those are some of the things I would do.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Vina McLean?
As we're sitting here, Just Georgia is holding a rally at the Glenn County Courthouse to demand the resignation of DA George Barnhill and DA Jackie Johnson for mishandling the case. So I just wanted to mention that. With the process for handling such cases should balance three different yet conflicting objectives. Protecting the independence of the prosecutorial decisions, providing accountability for those decisions, and professional competence, ensuring that the prosecutors who are and the investigators who are assigned to prosecute and investigate the case have the requisite expertise. One thing that also needs to be considered is that the investigation should never be led by the police agency that employs the shooting officer. Any appearance of bias undermines the public trust and the public perception of fairness. You should consider having the GBI or a neighboring law enforcement agency unconnected to the shooter investigate the case. Or, and if that officer has been employed with the district attorney's office, consider having a neighboring district attorney handle the case and make the determination whether or not to bring charges. But in no event should an elected district attorney abdicate their responsibility to hold someone accountable, because that is what the voters elect their district attorney to do. That is what they're elected to do. You have to be willing, and I'm standing on this, you hold the guilty accountable, and the guilty, if that includes the police, you have to be willing to hold them accountable. You should not abdicate that responsibility. And so the ultimate decision should be made by your district attorney. However, if there is a clear conflict of interest, it needs to be reassigned to a district attorney outside of the district.
15 seconds. Go ahead. Oh.
I think in this case, there were 3 DAs it passed through before it got to where it is now, at least. So what you're saying is taken at heart, definitely. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to continue on. And Ms. McLean, you have the first opportunity to answer this next question. Over half the population in Chatham County are African American, and we have a large growing and a fast growing Hispanic population. Here's the question. Do you believe that the demographic makeup of prosecutors in the DA's office should reflect the county's population base? And if so, what steps will you take to bring about such a balance? And if not, why not? And a follow-up question, and if I need to repeat this, let me know. How does the DA select assistant DAs?
Okay, several questions, and I'll try to answer them the best that I can. As I've always said, I believe the district attorney, the office of the district attorney should be a reflection of the population that it serves. Research suggests that having minority prosecutors in an office decreases sentencing disparities. But as an employment discrimination attorney, I also understand that people of color can discriminate and women can be sexist. So I understand that it doesn't always, it's not always true that if you have Black people who are prosecuting that they're not going to discriminate. The district attorney is a constitutional officer. So your line prosecutors and everyone in that office works at the discretion of the district attorney. I'm not familiar with how the current district attorney, what their selection process is. I know the type of individuals I would like to hire. Those individuals, I want people who value the same things that I value. Those are equal justice, fairness, and transparency. I intend to elect prosecutors who share my ideals, my philosophy. I intend to hire line prosecutors with a diverse background, not necessarily only people who are career prosecutors. I want diversity in experiences, diversity in personal backgrounds. I want people who have practiced civil rights law, of course, trial attorneys. I want people who are social scientists. I want people with diverse backgrounds, not only people of a certain color. So when I talk about diversity, those are the type of things that I'm going to be looking for in my employees. So hopefully that answers a lot of your questions, all of your questions.
You answered every one of them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Shalena Cook-Jones, 90 seconds to respond to that.
Thank you. I echo some of those the sentiments that my colleague, Ms. McLean, has made. I believe that diversity is important, not just for color's sake or race sake, but it's important because it adds different perspectives to the prosecutorial experience. And when we have people who are coming from diverse backgrounds, it creates a certain culture in the office. And the office that I worked in DeKalb County, which is a very diverse and very liberal county, demonstrated this. I think it's a fallacy to believe that Black prosecutors will go easy on Black defendants or vice versa. So I want to kind of debunk that fallacy. And so I believe that diversity is important just because it helps us helps prosecutors to bring their lived experiences to the table. In hiring ADAs, what I want to know is why they want to do this job. What is their commitment to justice? What other things have they done that have demonstrated and reflect the office values, that demonstrate a sense of equality, balance, and fairness? Not just number crunching, data, statistics, etc., but what have they done in their lives to kind of show the exercise of wisdom and judgment and fairness across the board.
Okay, thank you. We're nearing the end of our round one questions, and to kind of close it out, I have a follow-up question for both of you. If either of you are elected to be the prosecutor for the district attorney rather for Chatham County, you will be joining a numerical minority. There are not many African American and even fewer women, Black women prosecutors in the United States. Primarily, it is a white male fraternity, if you will. So the eyes are going to be on you in terms of how you run the district attorney's office, how equitable you are, equal justice, transparency, and all of that. How do you think you will fare under such a spotlight? How will that impact how you do what you do? We'll start with Ms. McLean.
Well, I'm going to be transparent. From the very beginning, I am going to be transparent in terms of what my immediate goals for the office are. As an African American woman, being under the spotlight and being expected being held to a different set of standards is nothing new. That is something that my mother and father have always taught me. So I understand what it is and what it's like to always be held by a different set of standards because of the color of my skin. So that is what I intend to do. I intend to be transparent and honest with the people. I'm going to set realistic goals. I'm going to report regularly to the people who voted for me on how I am working to achieve those goals. And in the end, the people will hold me accountable. So that is what I intend to do. And every year I'm going to set benchmarks. I'm going to change the present mission. Of course, I'm going to have my mission. I'm going to have my overall goals. So I'm going to have a plan in place, and I'm going to communicate that plan to the community. And
15 seconds.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cook-Jones.
Yes, thank you. It's a great question and a sensitive topic. It's not the first time that I've been in the racial minority, I guess. It was that way when I went to high school. I went to Midwood High School in New York, which was for gifted and talented students. I went to UGA for law school, where we were the vast minority. I have worked in firms where I was the first or only African American female, and in instances like that, I try to reflect back on what I heard Oprah Winfrey say one day during an interview. They said, well, usually you go in, you're so powerful and wealthy and experienced and traveled, you go into rooms where you're usually the only woman of color or person of color. How do you feel about that? And she said, well, I think I welcome that opportunity and I embrace it because I see it as an opportunity to shine. And for me, what's more important than what I look like on the outside are the standards and principles that drive me on the inside. I want to be the DA because I want to do right, because it's right to do right. I want to be the DA because I'm seriously committed to eradicating social injustice and creating a system that's fair and works for all. So I let that guide me. I let that be my internal compass. But it's also important to know that because of the Kim Foxes and Sherry Bostons and Rachel Rollinsons of the world who have come under attack, not just for being Black and female, but also being progressive prosecutors and implementing criminal justice reform, there's a great deal of resources available to us and camaraderie in that. Research has been done and a lot has been invested to make sure that these criminal justice reform ideas work. And so it's important for someone like me to be in the chair, to be driven to do the right thing and use the research and data and information that's available to me to do the job effectively.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Can I have a follow-up to that too?
Sure.
Okay, I just wanted to add, because I forgot, that I am the first African-American woman to run for the office of district attorney in Chatham County. I've owned and maintained my own law firm for over 23 years in this county. And as an African-American female, doing so was not easy. I didn't have an attorney father or any connections, but I was able to succeed. I was able to succeed because of the work that I did in the community, connecting with individuals in the community, people who saw my work and believed in me. I've never had to advertise, but people saw the work that I was doing, believed in me, and they kept my practice going. So I thank the Savannah community for that. Mhm.
Thank you. Thank you. So now we're going to move into round two. The rules for round two are that the initial respondent has 2 minutes, and the person giving the rebuttal now has 60 seconds to respond. Chuck Fagan will continue to be our timekeeper. Thank you, Chuck. I'll start off, and we'll start with you, Ms. Zena McClain, for this first 2-minute answer question. Studies have long shown that despite the fact that whites and non-whites use and sell drugs at roughly the same rate, Black and brown people are disproportionately arrested and prosecuted for drug crimes. How would you work to minimize those disparities?
With our youth?
I'm sorry?
Repeat the question again, I'm sorry.
Okay. Studies have long shown that despite the fact that whites and non-whites sell drugs at roughly the same rate, Black and brown people are disproportionately arrested and prosecuted for drug crimes. How would you work to minimize those disparities?
Well, one of the ways that some of the things that I can do is utilize prosecutorial discretion. You can divert certain cases to those programs. You have your programs that, what do they call them? Early intervention programs. I'm sorry, I had a loss. So utilize my prosecutorial discretion. You can decline to prosecute marijuana cases. You can be more sensitive regarding those issues in terms of racial disparities. You have to be transparent in your prosecutions. And so that is why I'm going to have annual reports that will report out statistical data in terms of the number of cases that we decline to prosecute, the types of cases that we're prosecuting, the demographics of the individuals, their race, their gender, the plea bargaining process, the types of bargains, the types of pleas that are offered, the sentencing ranges. So that is how you deal with the issues of those disparities that come up, those racial issues, being transparent in your prosecutions, and utilizing prosecutorial discretion.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Shalena Cook-Jones, 60 seconds.
Thank you. I acknowledge that racial disparities in drug prosecution exist, and I think that goes back to Reaganomics in the area of the war on drugs. I was living in New York at that time, growing up in New York at that time, so I'm very familiar with enforcement and those policies. But to be honest, I don't think that while I acknowledge that trend exists, I don't think that how we handle marijuana crimes has to be a racial discussion. And here's why. As prosecutor, I prioritize cases giving the greatest weight to those things that are most serious and pose the greatest risk to our community. So what that means is I'm looking at serious violent offenses that harm vulnerable communities, and repeat offenders. As it relates to the use of drugs, then, that means that as it relates to marijuana, I am looking at a possession of marijuana that suggests an intent to sell, as well as the possession of drugs in a school zone. As it relates to simple possession of marijuana, there are many ways to handle that, by creating diversion programs to see whether there is a need for drug treatment or counseling, by providing either a DA or court supervised system wherein they check in. They check in with us to see how they're doing. If they don't have any new drug offenses, then we dismiss them. There are a number of ways to handle the possession charges. And I think that handling them in an efficient way would address the racial disparities we've been seeing.
15 seconds.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to turn it back over to Ms. Constance Cooper.
This is an issue that's come up fairly recently, within the past, I'd say 5 or so years. Since the shooting in West Savannah, there's been this new policy of the district attorney to use civil grand juries when there's an officer-involved shooting. It is the only time these civil grand juries are used, and for anyone watching who's not familiar with the practice, the civil grand jury comes in an advisory capacity. And that civil grand jury reaches a decision, has findings as to whether or not a prosecution should go forward. Thus far, all civil grand juries have recommended no prosecution. And this is a unique set of circumstances. Arguably, it could be said that this does insulate the district attorney from that old Tom Wolfe quote that a DA could prosecute a ham sandwich, or could indict a ham sandwich and convince a grand jury to move forward. So I want your thoughts, starting with Ms. Cook-Jones, on the use of civil grand juries.
In this particular context, I want to start by saying that I have great respect for law enforcement. They put their lives on the line every day for me and for our county citizens. However, it's my perspective that as a DA, no one should be above the law. Where there is evidence to suggest that a shooting was improper, I think that law enforcement officers should be treated as just as others who have been accused of crimes. And so I think that how and in what instance we use the civil grand jury is an important thing to consider. And I would not be, as a DA, as a prosecutor, I would not be inclined to give officers any specialized treatment. I do want to say that there are things that are built into our legal system that most voters might not understand, that really address why officers continue to get off for these kinds of shootings. Other things like the reasonable person standard and things of that nature. I think we have to address those nuts and bolts in parts of the system as well. So my view is I would handle officer shootings, and if an officer comes up as a suspect, I would treat them as any other. I would require that they be
15 seconds.
Like any other citizen, and I would probably use the GBI more than a civil grand jury.
Thank you very much. Moving on to Ms. McClain, what are your thoughts on the use of civil grand juries with officer-involved shootings?
If I recall correctly, that process was the first time it's ever been used in the state of Georgia. And if I'm correct, probably across the country, because I could not find another example of a district attorney utilizing a civil grand jury. It was used twice in our county, once during the Charles Smith case that involved an officer shooting of an individual in the back of the police unit. And then Tony Thomas, who was an elected official. In both cases, it depends. People look at that differently. The way I saw it in both instances, either the district attorney is playing politics, or it borders the line of being unethical, because it's unethical for a prosecutor to seek to indict someone without good cause. Also, another way I looked at it is, and I've said this earlier when we were talking about the Ahmaud Arbery case,
15 seconds.
An elected district attorney should never abdicate its responsibilities, its duties. You are elected to make the tough decisions. If there is an issue as to there's a conflict of interest, of course, you give it to another district attorney. But there were a lot of things that I found bothersome about that process. And so, those are just my thoughts. Of course, everyone has their own personal about this, and a district attorney she had her reasons for why she did that, but I would not have undertaken those two instances in that way. Yeah.
Briefly for a follow-up, we don't want to go over time here, so let's stick to about 30 to 60 seconds if we could keep it down there, starting with Ms. Cook-Jones. You mentioned that the GBI should be brought in. In the Charles Smith case, the GBI was brought in. However, the prosecution was handled by the district attorney of Chatham County. Do you believe that given the nexus, given the close relationships between law enforcement officers and prosecutors, which are necessary to prosecute crimes, as a matter of course, district attorneys should bring in an outside DA in an officer-involved shooting?
Good question. The difficulty that I have with that question is that it suggests that there might be some internal bias in a law enforcement office investigating an officer-involved shooting. I have found that officers, at least the ones that I've worked with in my career, know how to call a spade, and where they are independently detached from the local agency, they don't really have a dog in the fight. So I'm not inclined to go as far as to suggest that there would be some bias there, and I wouldn't have a problem with the GBI conducting those kinds of investigations, because they do those kinds of investigations all the time. They investigate officers, they investigate attorneys, they investigate
15 seconds.
So I don't have a problem with them being, and they're equipped to do that in a way that civil grand juries are not. So I would be more inclined to give it to them, give it to the professionals.
And Ms. McClain, do you believe that the GBI, one, should be brought in as a matter of course for officer-involved shootings, which they generally seem to be at this point? And secondarily, do you believe that district attorneys should refer out cases, local cases, to other district attorneys when there's an officer-involved shooting?
Well, where there's a clear conflict of interest, of course, I think that it needs to go to another agency. I take no issue with the GBI investigating. My issue is with a civil grand jury, because by law, the district attorney is charged with is the legal advisor to the grand jury. So how sensible is it to have a group of individuals who are not familiar with the law to tell you whether or not a crime has been committed or whether or not certain facts meet the elements of a crime? It just does not make sense. And that is why I say that a district attorney should never abdicate its responsibilities under the law. So those are my
15
thoughts.
seconds.
I disagree with.
Go ahead, Ms. Jones.
I disagree with that, because that's exactly what grand juries do. The DA's job is to present the facts and to interpret the law. In other words, state what the law is. And that's something that they do in the grand jury week after week throughout the course of the year. If there's any truth to Attorney McClain's statement, then we shouldn't have trial juries or anything of that fact, because they don't know anything about the law.
15 seconds.
That's exactly why we have jurors, because they're smart people. They're the citizens that can make these determinations. So as I said, I prefer to give that to the GBI, because they are both equipped and experienced to handle these kinds of investigations, before I would turn it over to a civil grand jury.
Thank you very much. Moving on to our next question. This question is a little bit more geared towards those who are less familiar with the prosecutorial system, which has become in many ways a system of pleas, not a trial system. So I want to get your thoughts on prosecutorial discretion and how that interacts with decisions on how to charge crimes. It's often said that you charge high, you plea low. What are your thoughts on that practice? And also, what are your thoughts on how that practice has been applied in Chatham County? And then I'll be starting with Ms. McClain.
Okay, prosecutorial discretion basically means the prosecutor controls the entire process. The prosecutor controls who ultimately comes into the justice system, what charges an individual faces, and the trajectory of the case. The prosecutor also controls the plea bargain process. I like to use this, when I talk to clients about the entire process, and this is what, let's take for instance, those charges where you have mandatory minimums. Now, Georgia has some of the most restrictive laws on its books, okay? Very, very restrictive laws. Georgia has laws, three strikes you're out laws, okay? So if you're charged, if you're a repeat offender, you will trigger some of those mandatory minimums, or if you commit a certain crime, like armed robbery, it's a mandatory minimum sentence. So at the very, that ties the hands of a judge who will typically sentence. So what happens if you, the more charges that are on the book, the more laws you have, district attorneys generally have several different ways in which to charge a crime. Factor into that, let's take the gang violence law, okay? That's a way of stacking charges. So when you add the gang charge to it, it adds additional penalties. So when you stack charges, you make it hard, and there's a mandatory minimum. The judge doesn't determine the sentence is already there. So the more tough you are with the charges that you bring, it increases the penalty. And if someone
15 seconds,
they're going to be more inclined to want to plead out because of the penalties that they're facing. So it drives the plea bargain process. It leads to, you don't have very many trials. I think that less than 2% or 1.5% of the cases are actually go to a jury trial. So basically, your prosecutor controls the entire process.
Time.
Ms. Cook-Jones.
Prosecutorial discretion and that concept really gets to the heart of how much latitude the prosecutor demonstrates or the DA demonstrates. And this can be acted out in a number of ways. So for example, a prosecutor can say, I am going to not charge any misdemeanor prosecution offenses. They can decide, I'm not going to prosecute this particular class of cases. But it also plays out in exactly, it can play out in who a prosecutor charges. And that's where we get cherry picking, which means if two people are charged with the same offense, I'm not going to charge this one, but I am going to charge and prosecute this one. That would be an unlawful use of power, and that's something that we see a lot. But in addition to stacking charges, some of the other things that we have is, it's been my experience in that office that there are some who believe that if you don't have the evidence to support a felony, charge it as a felony, and then get the person to plea as a misdemeanor. I believe that that is unconstitutional, and it's not a policy I would support.
15 seconds.
At a trial wherein it was an elder abuse trial, and that was a trial I was defending, and the prosecutor charged 123 counts. And I mean, everybody's going to be found guilty of something if they're charged with 123 counts, but that's an improper strategy. And so the prosecutor you put in office has to be sensitive to those different strategies and know what is unlawful use of power and discretion versus what is a lawful use of power and discretion.
Time.
Thank you very much. Dr. Bryant?
Thank you. Thank you. The Savannah End Gun Violence Initiative began as a city-funded project. Now, both the funding and the position were moved under the county prosecutor's office. What are your thoughts about this initiative being a part of the DA's office? And what role do you believe the district attorney should have with this initiative? Shalena Cook-Jones, will begin with you for a 2-minute response.
As to this specific issue, I acknowledge and have heard information to suggest that moving this program into the DA's office was a political decision that was motivated by campaign promises, etc. Without getting to the veracity or the truth of that issue, I think it begs another question, which is the transparency and of that office and its duty to the public and principles of equity and fairness. As a DA, I am very concerned about the appearance of impropriety. And so while I believe that the project to end gun violence is certainly something, an initiative and a cause that we would take up, I think I would do a few things differently. The first is I would make sure that it's properly planned, staffed, and budgeted for. I would make sure that it's a collaborative effort, that's not only funded by the DA, but also invested in by other segments of our community and other government offices. And I would also make sure that once I put it in place, it's not dependent on the person to give them a salary. I would make sure that there's accountability wherein we can make sure that that program and initiative operates in the way it's supposed to. And I think those were the particular failings with this particular gun violence initiative. I think it's a worthwhile cause, but I would do it differently.
Thank you. Ms. McLean?
Based on the numbers and the spike in violent crimes, the program is not working. There needs to be more transparency and more accountability as it pertains to how the citizens' monies are being spent. Since the initial launch of the program, I believe we're on our third program director or project director. I recall at one time, Dr. Bryant, you were involved in the process. You were hired. I believe you were the first individual. So yeah, you were the first individual. I attended a meeting where an elected official said that there were over 7,000 gang members in the state, 71,000 gang members in the state of Georgia, 1,400 of whom had been identified in Chatham County. And at that time, and this was in January, 400 were supposedly housed at the Chatham County Jail. The questions I have is, why has only 83 letters been successfully delivered under that program? Why only 86 participants, including community leaders, available for a call-in when we have over 1,400 gang members? Why has only 41 citizens taken advantage of the end gun violence program? Perhaps the current district attorney desired to oversee the program because she's laser focused on gang violence. But based on the numbers, based on what I've been able to see in the reporting, I don't see the program under her leadership being impactful, effective, or successful.
15 seconds.
Okay, I want to see the program work. What I would like to see is additional funding. I want to make sure that we have the people who have the requisite qualifications and skills to actually do the job. I want to see additional individuals hired to work in the program. So the program needs major overhauling. I don't see a problem with the district attorney being in charge of it or overseeing the program, but I do have a problem, an issue with the way it's currently being implemented and the numbers, because based on the numbers, it's not successful.
Time.
Let me just do a quick follow-up. Chatham County is, to my knowledge, it may be even the only entity utilizing that model where it sits under the DA. Most of the other models of which we modeled that initiative, it rests with the city. Are either of you opposed with the initiative going back to being a city-run, a city-operated and city-funded initiative? We'll start with Ms. Cook-Jones for that. Would you be opposed to it being returned to the city as a city-operated and city-funded project?
I would be, my first inclination is to be opposed to that. And the reason I say that is because Chatham County is not just consistent of the city of Savannah. We have another 100,000 citizens who live in Chatham County and who are outside the city. I think that it also places a great burden on the city police officers and the city police department who will be working with these on this issue and as part of this initiative. I think the good thing about it being a county program is that we get to use the breadth
15 seconds
and resources of all of our municipalities, police departments and funds, etc. So if we're truly going to make it an effective program, it needs to be collaborative, and I think we need to do it at the county level. Whether or not that needs to be out of the DA's office, I don't think that it has to be, but I would prefer a county level enforcement as opposed to the city level.
Thank you.
Time.
I believe when it was initially launched, it was a collaborative effort. We had a merged police department at that time.
No,
It wasn't merged, it was afterwards, okay, when it was initially, at some point, there was an intergovernmental agreement where all three agencies signed off on the agreement. And I believe at that time, the district attorney was to oversee it, but the law enforcement portion was to be handled by law enforcement. Both the city and the county have financial responsibilities. So that said, I mean, it was it's been through some changes. So all that said is
15 seconds.
I have no issue with law enforcement playing its role. But also you have to look, I believe it's a grant. You have to look at how the grant was actually written, because you do have to abide, you have to be in line with the specifications with how the grant is written. So because I've not seen the actual grant, I would have to take a look at that. But you know, either way with me, it's fine, as long as the district attorney does have some input. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll turn it back over to Ms. Constance Cook.
Thank you, Dr. Bryant. Currently, Georgia is one of only 3 states that require 17-year-olds to be charged as adults. There was some effort in the General Assembly that ultimately stalled to move that to the age of 18. Further, the Superior Court has exclusive jurisdiction over crimes known as the 7 deadlies, committed by individuals ages 13 to 17. Just wanted to get your thoughts on both of those issues and also on prosecutorial discretion, particularly as it comes to 13 to 17-year-olds with the 7 deadlies, which generally consist of what one would think aggravated murder, aggravated molestation, robbery, etc. Please, starting with Ms. McLean.
Well, there are a lot of things that factor into that. Designated felons. There are certain crimes, you know, there are different classifications to be deemed a designated felon as a youth. It applies to youth between the age of 13 and 17, I believe. And at that time, because they don't meet the standard of being adults, and if the district attorney chooses to keep it under the purview of the juvenile court, you know, if ultimately adjudicated a delinquent, they spend time in the juvenile facility. I don't do a lot of juvenile work. I haven't done that in a while, but that's my cursory understanding of it. I have a lot of problems with, well, let me put it this way. I understand that we do have youth that commit very serious crimes. At the same time, I've represented young people who just barely made it at 18 or 17, who were charged with offenses, let's say armed robbery. But when you get into the facts, it doesn't make sense. At that time, you know, I'm wondering, why is the district attorney intentional in trying to keep with the charge?
15 seconds.
Don't make up. So at that time, I think we have a lot of cases where a district attorney can exercise prosecutorial discretion and not send those cases up to Superior Court. So there are a lot of issues that factor into that in making those decisions. So you can utilize prosecutorial discretion, look at the facts, do understand if there are some young individuals, and of course, you know, you have to.
Thank you, Ms. McLean. Ms. Cook-Jones, 60 seconds to you on the role of the district attorney in prosecuting those 17 years old as adults and also 13 to 17-year-olds in the 7 days.
The reason we have a juvenile court and we should treat youthful offenders as children. That's my belief. Although I recognize that they are capable of committing some heinous crimes, the fact that it makes us angry and we find it detestable doesn't change that. All of the social science and psychological studies demonstrate that children between the ages of 13 and 17, their brains aren't developed. This is why we don't let them drive, that we don't let them drink, and we don't let them smoke. Criminal justice and prosecution should actually be no different. If the ultimate goal of juvenile prosecution is not just to punish and to penalize, but should also be to restore, to rehabilitate, and to help them reintegrate back into society. If you make people at that age designated as a felon, you automatically close doors to them in terms of employability, education, job access. And so what does that do? You actually create more criminals by these criminal designations. And one of the particular reasons that this is an area that we really need to address, and it's a problem because with the anti-gang statute that was recently discussed, it takes away the prosecutor's discretion with where crimes are between 13-year-olds and 17.
15 seconds.
The point that I'm making is I support and would institute a criminal justice system that believes in punishing juveniles for the crimes that they commit, but also allows them an opportunity once correction has been established to move forward with their life in their future in a meaningful and productive way. And so that would be my approach.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cook-Jones. And this next question will be starting with you, particularly given your experience in the DeKalb County DA's office. Would you support creating a white collar crimes unit such as the one in DeKalb County and Chatham County, and why?
Going into the DA's office, my immediate approach would be to check out resources. Okay, so whatever changes I make in that DA's office are going to be based on what the needs are of that office and what my resources are to meet those needs. As it relates to, if it turns out in doing that assessment that white collar crime is a high priority for this particular jurisdiction and area, then I will direct resources toward it after I, satisfy the other priorities that I have. In my experience in this office and in DeKalb County, the way that white collar crime comes about actually is in the form of elder abuse cases, where there's a lot of financial fraud, identity theft, security infractions, and stolen credit cards, stolen bank accounts, and things of that nature. So I would make that a priority because the victim in that case is a member of a vulnerable population. Do you see what I'm saying? So as I sit here today, I wouldn't be able to say yes or no, I would create a white collar crime unit. It would have to depend on the needs and what I found in my initial investigation.
Thank you very much. Dr. McLean, what are your thoughts on a white collar crime unit here in Chatham County?
Well, again, I have my list of priorities. It's not on my list of priorities right now. Based on what I've read in our community, in the papers, I don't really see a need for it. However, I'm not in the office and I don't know what's in the pipeline of being prosecuted. I don't know if there are some special indictments coming down. So I would have to get in there and do an overall inspection of the types of cases that are there. And if I find a need for it, maybe that will come later on in my term as district attorney. But right now going in, I have already outlined some of the things I want to focus on in white collar crime. Is just
15 seconds.
Thank you very much. Moving it over to Dr. Bryant. Thank you very much.
Dr. Bryant, I just wanted to say, just for sake of time here, this will be our last question. Yes. If you'll ask question number 15 on our list here, and then we'll let our candidates give closing thoughts.
Thank you very much, Chuck. A large part of our costs that are involved with the DA's office are for housing pretrial inmates, especially non-violent misdemeanors or non-violent felonies who are unable to bond out because of monetary constraints. What steps would you take to safely reduce the rate of pretrial incarceration in our county? Ms. McLean, we'll start with you for a 2-minute response.
Bail should never be used as a punitive measure. As for the steps that I would undertake to reduce pretrial incarceration, I'll publicly support the elimination of cash bail absent a reasonable suspicion of domestic violence or other substantial safety threat. Where bail is required, I'll advocate for the accused's right to have counsel present. And I'll presume a right to pretrial release for all defendants, absent a substantial threat to the public safety. So those are the steps I intend to undertake.
Thank you. Ms. Shalena Cook-Jones.
I believe we've lost her for a moment.
Okay. Okay then. Well, actually it is 2:50 and The debate was designed to go until 2:50. Hopefully, Ms. Shalena Cook-Jones can join us back. At this time, we're going to give each candidate an opportunity for a 2-minute, 2.5-minute closing statement. So, Ms. Dina McClain, how would you like to close this out? What memorable types of statement or type of statement would you like to leave with the listening audience today?
I'll have a very short closing. Oprah Winfrey said it best. Truth allows you to live every day with integrity. Everything you do and say shows the world who you really are, and let it be the truth. Everything that I've said has been the truth. I am true to myself, and I stand true in my convictions on equality, justice, and transparency. You will have no stronger warrior for justice, no better advocate for sensible solutions to fix our broken system of justice, no better champion of solutions and programs to address the root causes of crime, and no stronger voice for and believer of equality and transparency than me, Zena McClain, your justice reform warrior. If you would like to learn more information about me and my campaign, please feel free to visit my website at www.zenamcclain.com. You can also visit my Facebook page at Vote Zena McClain at the Justice Reform Warrior, or my Instagram at Vote Zena McClain. It has been my pleasure to present on this platform. I thank Better Savannah for hosting. I thank the moderators for doing an excellent job moderating. And I thank your listening audience for listening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Shalena Cook-Jones, I see you were able to join back with us. Thank you. And we're giving closing statements. We're giving you all an opportunity to have closing statements. You have 2.5 minutes to leave the listening audience with something that is memorable, that they can hear from you about, that they can remember about you.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Looks like I made it back just in time. I think Attorney Cooper's cat came and stepped on my power plug, but I made it back. I just want to let the citizens of this great county know that I'm running for office because my hope is that we can establish a criminal justice system that works well for everyone, that is efficient and helps us to move our cases along more swiftly and ensure justice for those who really need it, that is fair and equitable, and make sure that we are not that we are handling our cases in a fair and even-handed way, and most importantly, to make sure that it's effective and that the system works the way that it should. I want to again thank you for the opportunity. I really look forward to engaging our citizens more in this process and having more of these very important conversations. Thank you for allowing me to be here today, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you both. I want to thank my co-moderator, Constance Cooper, and now I'll return it back over to Chuck Fagan.
Thank you, Dr. Bryant. Thank you, Constance Cooper. Better Savannah wants to make a big thank you to both of you for taking time out of your busy Saturday during this crisis to moderate this event for us. We really appreciate it. We think this was a very, very strong event on policy. And we want to thank especially our two candidates, Zena McClain and Shalena Cook-Jones, for agreeing to sit down for this debate this afternoon. As a reminder to all voters, early voting begins on Monday. If you must vote in person, please do so safely, adhering to social distancing guidelines as best as you can. For everybody else, please make sure to return your ballots at least 2 days before the election. The postmark must be June 8th, the day before. They must receive the ballot in the mail the day before the election. So make sure to mail your ballots no later than say around June 3rd or June 4th. Again, we want to thank all of the viewers on the live broadcast for joining us. We will be back here on this page in just a matter of a few hours at 5:30 p.m. for a debate between the two candidates running for the Democratic nomination for the chairman of the Chatham County Commission, Commissioners Jay Jones and Chester Ellis. John McMasters and myself will be moderating this debate this evening. We appreciate you joining us. We'll see you later.